Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Growing Up Trad. If you're new here, my name is Clara. I grew up in a traditional Latin Mass community from the age of 6 to 16, and I talk about my experience in the Latin Mass and what I've learned and am learning from going from that community to a Novus Ordo community. I'm so glad you're here to learn with me, and I always encourage people to come here with an open mind. I think one of the most important things we can do, and I learned this from transitioning from Latin Mass to Novus Ordo because I found myself being very judgmental. It was very hard to unlearn that, but once I did, I realized how much I can strengthen my faith and grow in my faith, learn from other people, and have empathy for other people by listening to their opinions, especially when those opinions differ from my own. So I encourage you to come here with an open mind. Today we are talking about, as usual, a controversial topic, a very taboo topic. We are talking about the talk. We're talking about sex, how we teach that to children. We're talking about the period taboo, and how purity culture is damaging our relationships. And we need to talk about sex more. So we're doing it. I'm starting the conversation. Another disclaimer, a classic disclaimer that I make. I just want to say none of this is to shame my parents in any way because they did the best they could with what they knew. They truly thought they were doing what's best. And I think it turned out pretty good if I do say so myself. So something right. And they're also very different people from who they were when I was younger. So I love them very much. And I'm very grateful for them. But they did not give me the talk. I never learned about sex. All I knew is, a seed from the dad and an egg from the mom creates a baby. Only when you're married. So we're talking about that today. Why don't we teach our kids about sex? I think there are 3 main reasons. But, there are certainly more than that. But these are the main 3 that I've come up with. First, children are innocent, right? We think children are too pure. They don't need to know about sex. They're just kids. Let them be kids. Second, we think children won't understand. They don't understand love and passion, and they wouldn't be interested in that. The third thing, and I think this is the most common reason, is that it's awkward. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody has the guts to talk about it with their children. But here's the deal. I think the reason why it's awkward for us is because we still have a little piece of us that thinks that sex is bad, right? We have a little bit of shame still in us. And that's what makes it feel awkward. That's what makes it feel awkward to talk about with our children. So we don't teach our kids about sex. Then we assume that they know about sex. Once they're teens or adults, we start having conversations with them about topics about sex in the church or something, right? We start involving them in those conversations and just assuming that they know. And they do know, but you didn't teach them that, which we're going to get into later. And then once we assume they know about sex, we start teaching them that sex is bad and it should be avoided, right? And we should basically do everything in our power to not be tempted to have sex. Then they get married, and now sex is good. You're supposed to want sex. You're supposed to have sex. You're supposed to think that sex is good. And it is good. But that is an incredibly hard mental battle when you've been told your whole life that it's bad, or it's just not been talked about. So here's the deal. Are kids innocent? Yes. but not as innocent as you realize. And I want to share with you some statistics that are terrifying, but so real, and we need to be aware of them. 3 out of 4 teenagers viewed porn at some time in their life, and more than half of those teenagers had seen sexually explicit content by the age of 13, and often as young as 7. And that is from a study in 2023. I imagine that as the years go on, that age gets younger and younger because of the ways that technology are becoming more prevalent in our lives today. And I'm sure a lot of people are listening to this and thinking, well, my kids won't see porn because I'm not going to let them have devices. But I know personally families that give their kids, well, I don't know if I can say brand names on here, but phones that are basically, there's zero internet access on them, and text and photos are filtered, and parents can see everything on their phone from their own device. And families that have rules that you are not allowed to take devices into another room by yourself, and if you are on a device, your screen needs to be facing an adult so the adult can see what you're looking at on your screen at all times. I know people in those families who have seen porn. So you think that you have the strictest rules that are going to keep your children as safe as possible, but they're not. It's not as safe as you think. 75% of parents in the study I mentioned earlier claimed that their kids had not seen porn. 53% of those kids told the researchers they had seen porn. And those are just the ones that are brave enough to say that they had, right? That doesn't include everybody. This is sort of a side note, but I think we often assume that that is only boys, or mostly boys, right? We think that the girls are a small percentage, but 68% of those were boys, 53% were girls. Yeah, the boys are slightly higher, but that's just a little sliver. This is as big of an issue for women as it is for men. I just think that's something we need to keep in mind. So the problem with porn, and I'm sure everybody listening to this is aware, but I just want to kind of reiterate the issue with porn. It's unrealistic, right? It's not like sex in real life. So you have an unrealistic view of sex. It's often violent, especially towards women. And it's often non-consensual. So these are obviously big issues, right? Having an unrealistic view of sex is terrible for a marriage, right? So many people who have had porn addictions, they can't be aroused in normal sex because that level of arousal from porn is so unrealistic, right? So that's obviously a huge problem. Everything that porn is what we don't want our children to know about sex, right? Because it's not true. It's not what real sex is. So either we teach our children about sex, or we let someone else, whether that's porn, whether that's the school system, whether that's your children's friends, a neighbor, whoever it might be, right? They're going to hear about it one way or another. Even if you're homeschooled, even if you have all the rules on your devices, your children are going to learn about it somehow, right? Before marriage. Let's be so for real. And so we can either teach them about sex, or we can let somebody else teach them about sex. And I truly believe we need to teach them about sex before they're teenagers. maybe even before the age of 7, right? Because as we've seen from those studies, children are intrigued by those things, right? And yeah, not every child in those statistics was searching for porn, but seeing porn at a young age is how that addiction starts, right? So that how do we bring it up? Like, what age should we teach this to our kids? I think a lot of times, most of the time, kids are so curious, right? They're going to ask you, where do babies come from? That's when you need to answer the question. Instead of saying, oh, you'll learn about that when you're older, or giving them a vague answer like, well, when mommies and daddies are in love and they get married, God gives them a kid, or, you know, the mom has an egg and the dad has a seed, and that's how babies are made. That doesn't answer the question, right? Obviously, they're looking for something. Then they're going to ask you a follow-up question. Well, how does the seed get to the egg? So we just need to be honest with them. Why are we not being honest with them? Why are we instilling in them at such a young age that sex is bad? It's not bad. It's beautiful and it's good. And we can teach them about that without encouraging them to have a sexual life before marriage, right? A 6-year-old might not understand love and passion, but they can understand biology, and that's not bad, right? So my proposition is that the way we talk to children is just maybe, explain to them what sex is, use anatomical terms because that's not bad either. The names for our bodies are not bad. For our body parts, that's not bad. So maybe just explain it to them. And they're probably going to have a reaction that's like, ugh, that's gross. I don't want to do that. Because, again, they don't understand the passion and love yet. And instead of being like, yeah, that's gross, don't do that, maybe we can just teach them sex is a beautiful thing that God designed, and it's for the unification of spouses, and it's a way to express your love, but it's so special and so sacred that we save that special thing for the special person that God has created for us to marry. And that's when we give that gift. And I think at some point, your children are likely going to see an unmarried couple with kids and they're going to have questions, right? They're going to be like, wait, what? Just explain to them, like sex is still good and we can do the wrong thing, right? By having sex before marriage, right? Like that's disordered, but it's still a beautiful thing. And it's so beautiful that God can give the gift of life through that. And how beautiful that God gave that gift of life to that couple, right? The baby is still a good thing. So I think really the work needs to be done inside of us adults, right? We need to change the way that we think about sex before we can teach it to our children, because it doesn't need to be awkward. But that's in us. Our children are not thinking about it as awkward until we present it in a way that's awkward. And some kids might be too shy to ask. I was a pretty shy kid. I didn't want to ask my mom any of those questions, but luckily I had a sister that did. So any kind of awkward question, my sister usually asked, and then I stuck around for the answer. So I think, your kids are probably going to ask you that while you're playing on the floor with them. So have the conversation with them in front of everybody else. Again, don't make it weird. Don't be like, oh, let's go in our bedroom and talk about this, and then be like, don't tell any of the rest of the kids that we had this conversation. Just have it in front of everybody. Everyone can hear it, and that's how we make those things more normalized. Not that it should be just thrown about, right? Of course, it's a special thing. It's an important thing, and it shouldn't, I guess maybe normalized isn't the right word. It is, but it isn't, because we don't want to make it just something that's nothing, because it's not nothing. Yeah, have those conversations in front of everybody. Then kind of bouncing off of that topic is the topic of cycles, periods with girls. And I'm sure this topic will kind of be included in some of my other podcasts because it relates to a lot of other things. But this topic truly baffles me. Why are periods so hush hush, so taboo? I understand it's a personal thing and it like has to do with your reproductive organs, but it's a normal thing, right? It's a normal bodily function that happens to every girl in your life. It doesn't need to be hidden. And like for me, well, something that my husband said is that he wishes he knew he wishes that he knew about periods when he was younger, because he would realize, like, why is my sister so on edge? Like, why is she so upset? And he will tell me, like, I wish I would have known, because then I at least could have had like a little bit more empathy for her and like given her a little more grace. But instead I just thought she was in a terrible mood for no reason, and that wasn't fair. And for me, I have endometriosis and I have debilitating periods. It really affects my everyday life. And so if my husband, when he was my boyfriend, if he hadn't known about my period, which he didn't at first, but eventually I told him. And that was honestly so good, because how can you hide that? I'm just having a bad day and I'm just like laying in bed for no reason. Or do I need to like lie to him and tell him that I have the flu? Like, I think it's so good. And I keep seeing these reels on Instagram. I think this is like something that is actually, people are really waking up to this. And I think there's sort of a flip that's happening where these moms are teaching their little boys about periods. And so there's all these videos of little boys and their dads like going to get flowers and chocolate and bringing them to mom while she lays in bed. I think that's so sweet. And again, like, the little boys don't think it's weird if it's normal. If we treat it like this is what happens and this is how we can take care of her when she feels like this. How sweet is that? And how those boys are going to be amazing husbands one day, because they're already like trained up for that. So I don't know, guys. That one really baffles me. We need to be more open about that. It's a normal bodily function, and we should treat it like that instead of treating it like a taboo. And kind of, okay, connected to this topic, I knew a lot of people who tampons were like bad. They were okay. I wasn't allowed to use them, but I'm not sure if this was for the same reason or if it was just because I had a crunchy mom and she didn't think that those were healthy, which I agree with. Guys, go find the ones that are free of tested for heavy metals and all that. But that is totally a side tangent and my own personal opinion. But I knew so many people where they weren't allowed to wear tampons because it was like sexual again. Like, what in the world, guys? Nobody ever put a tampon up their hoo-ha and thought that it felt good, okay? It does not feel good. And nobody wants to use a tampon, okay? But that one can make me fume. I can't believe that. if you need to hear it from a married girl, it does not feel the same as sex does, okay? So just use the tampon and have no moral qualms about it. It's gonna be okay. Anyways, I think this is it for this episode, but there might end up being a part 2 because there's so much more we can. I think I need a part 2 about purity culture in adults and teenagers and how that affects marriages and relationships, because I think that's super important. But for now, this is part 1 of purity culture, the talk, all the things. I hope this made you think, and I don't have it all figured out. We'll see how this plays out when I actually have kids. But I hope my experience and the experience of others makes you think, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know if you have any thoughts on this, whether they agree or disagree with me. I would love to hear your thoughts. Substack is a great place for us to have discussions if you'd like to do that. If you don't know what Substack is, it's basically a social media platform for mostly for writers, and they also have newsletters that go out. So it's a super great place for discussion. And if you want to, you can head over there. I believe my Substack is linked in my bio, or maybe under this episode. I don't know, guys. I'm new to all this. The tech stuff is actually confusing, and that's coming from a Gen Zer, guys. Anyways, I hope you all have a wonderful day. I hope you go think about this and pray about this, and let me know what you think. Thank you so much for being here. Bye-bye.